In the autumn of 1907, on a field outside Dearborn, Michigan, something sputtered, lurched forward, and died. Henry Ford, founder of the fastest-growing automobile company in the United States, climbed down from a seat no one had designed for this purpose, wiped grease from his hands, and stood in front of a machine that should not have existed. The board of directors had said no. His shareholders had said no. The Ford Motor Company had refused, flatly and formally, to build a single farm tractor. And yet here it was. Steel grain binder wheels sunk into dark Michigan topsoil, a 1905 Model B engine ticking under an improvised hood, the smell of burned coolant drifting across a quiet field. He had built it anyway. The machine had no name, no serial number, no official designation of any kind. Ford called it his Automobile Plow, a phrase that said everything about how he had built it, and nothing about what he wanted it to become. And its engine came from a 1905 Model B automobile. Its frame, wheel hubs, and radiator were salvaged from a 1907 Model K. The rear wheels had been pulled from two grain binders, wide and lugged and completely mismatched to anything resembling road use. It was, by every conventional measure, a failure waiting to happen. It overheated within minutes of sustained field work. A newspaper correspondent, having seen it demonstrated, dismissed it as nothing more than a tin Lizzie fitted with different wheels. But Henry Ford was not a man who accepted the verdict of a single field test. He was 43 years old in 1907. He had already failed twice in the automobile business before succeeding with the Ford Motor Company in 1903. He knew precisely what it felt like when a machine refused to cooperate. And he knew just as precisely that the refusal was never final. More troubling to him than the overheating engine or the slipping wheels was something that had happened inside a boardroom on Woodward Avenue. Yet the men who held shares in his company, the men whose fortunes had been built on his automobiles, had looked at his automobile plow and told him it was a distraction. They had not merely discouraged the idea, they had moved to block it entirely. If you want to see how one man's forbidden machine changed every farm in America, a machine his own company tried to kill, here's what I ask. See that subscribe button? It's our exchange. Your way of saying this reached you. Hit subscribe if this story moved you. Drop a like if it pulled you in. And tell us in the comments, did you know that Henry Ford had to build his tractor in secret using his own money because Ford Motor Company refused to fund it? That story lives right here on Tractor Junkie USA. Back to Henry Ford, his borrowed engine, and the boardroom that told him no. To understand how this happened, we have to go back. Henry Ford was born on July 30th, 1863, on a prosperous farm in Wayne County, Michigan, just a few miles outside Detroit. His father, William Ford, was a careful and capable farmer, the kind of man who kept his fields tidy and his debts manageable. But young Henry hated the work. He was not built for it. Years later, he would write plainly, "My earliest recollection is that, considering the results, there was too much work on the place." What he loved was machinery. He loved the way a mechanism could translate effort into outcome with absolute predictability. Horses offered no such guarantee. They tired, sickened, refused, and died. Machines, he believed, were loyal in ways that animals never could be. In the summer of 1875, 12-year-old Henry Ford was riding in a wagon alongside his father on a dirt road outside Dearborn when a steam threshing engine crossed their path. It was self-propelled. It moved under its own power, without a horse, without a man walking beside it pulling a lead rope. Ford stared at it until it disappeared around a bend in the road. He would later describe the encounter as the moment that determined the direction of his life. He jumped from the wagon, chased the machine down the road, and peppered the engineer with questions until the man relented and showed him the controls. That boy, the one who could not stop asking questions about a steam engine on a Michigan dirt road, would spend the next 30 years trying to put that same power back into a farmer's hands. Ford left the family farm in 1881 and trained as a machinist in Detroit. By 1893, he was chief engineer at the Detroit Edison Illuminating Company. On Christmas Eve of that year, he tested a one-cylinder engine in his kitchen sink. By June 1896, and he had built and driven his first automobile, a 4-horsepower quadricycle that he had to knock a hole in his brick garage wall to extract, because the car was wider than the door. In 1903, he launched the Ford Motor Company with $28,000 in borrowed capital. By 1907, the company was producing 100 automobiles a day. Ford had never forgotten the farm. Even as the Model T came into focus, he was quietly directing a parallel effort. In 1906, 2 years before the Model T debuted, and he instructed his engineer Joseph Gallum and a colleague named C.J. Smith to begin assembling a tractor from surplus automobile components. There was no budget line for this work. There was no formal project designation. The work was done in spare hours, with leftover parts, under no official sanction from the company's shareholders. Gallum and Smith used a 1905 Ford Model B engine with copper water jackets, 4-spoked wheels, and a large cylindrical water tank mounted on the frame. While the machine had no cab, no fenders, and no concession to operator comfort whatsoever. The completed machine was tested on Ford's own farm near Dearborn sometime in 1907. The results were, to put it gently, mixed. The Automobile Plow pulled a grain binder across the field, which was more than any automobile had done on farmland before. But the engine overheated within minutes of sustained operation. The steel wheels slipped badly under any significant drawbar load. Yet Ford studied it with concentrated patience, the look of a man cataloging exactly what needed to be done next. The men who held shares in Ford Motor Company were watching. They had already grown uneasy about Henry Ford's habit of reinvesting profits rather than distributing dividends. The most vocal opponents were Horace and John Dodge, who held 10% of Ford Motor Company stock. When Ford began diverting engineering talent toward tractor experiments, the Dodge brothers made their position clear. A tractor program, they argued, was a misuse of shareholder capital. It needed to stop. Ford did not argue. He did not present the board with cost projections or engineering reports. He did something far more characteristic. He simply continued. He used his own money. He directed a small group of trusted engineers to keep working on tractor designs after hours, off the official company ledger. By 1912, he had filed his first formal tractor patent, laying out a design with a horizontal engine block and bolted together cast housings that would eventually eliminate the need for a conventional frame entirely. By 1915, the tension inside Ford Motor Company had reached the point of rupture. The Dodge brothers filed a lawsuit against Henry Ford. The Michigan courts, when they finally ruled in 1917, agreed with the Dodges on a fundamental principle. A company exists, primarily, to generate profit for its shareholders. Ford was irate. He had not built the Model T so that a handful of investors could clip coupons in a boardroom. In late 1915, Henry Ford did something the board had not anticipated. He announced, publicly and with full press coverage, that he intended to leave Ford Motor Company and start a new enterprise, Henry Ford and Son, to build the tractor the old company had refused to fund. It was not a bluff. He opened a tractor plant on Brady Street in Dearborn in 1915. He was not asking permission. He was not inviting negotiation. He was simply building. The tractor that emerged from the Brady Street plant bore almost no resemblance to the 1907 Automobile Plow. A decade of iteration had produced something genuinely new. The engine, transmission case, and rear axle housing were bolted directly together, forming the structural frame of the tractor itself. No external chassis, no welded frame rails. This concept, unit construction, would become the standard for every farm tractor in the world within a generation. World War I changed everything. By 1917, the battlefields of France and Belgium had consumed an entire generation of European farm labor. The horses were gone. Fields sat unplanted across Britain. And the British government sent a delegation to Henry Ford and Son with an urgent request: tractors, as many as could be built, as fast as they could be delivered. 6,000 of them were in use across Britain, Canada, and the United States by mid-1918. In 1919, Ford played the final card. He resigned as president of Ford Motor Company and announced that Henry Ford and Son would now branch out into automobiles and trucks. Every single minority shareholder sold. Ford bought them all out. He paid approximately $75 million to acquire complete control of the company he had built with 28,000. The Fordson Model F went into full American production in 1918. It weighed approximately 2,700 pounds. Its four-cylinder engine produced around 20 horsepower at the belt. It sold for $750 at introduction, still far below the price of any competing tractor on the market. By the time American domestic production ended in 1928, Ford had sold more than 744,000 Fordson tractors in the United States alone. The company that tried to kill the tractor had become the tractor company that fed the world. The 1907 Automobile Plow no longer runs through a field near Dearborn. Most of what Ford built in those secret sessions, the machines assembled on personal money, outside company ledgers, against the explicit wishes of his shareholders, were consumed by time, cannibalized for parts, or simply forgotten in sheds that no longer stand. What survived was not the iron. What survived was the decision that Ford made every single day for a decade, to keep building a machine that the most powerful men in his professional life had told him had no right to exist. The Fordson Model F was not an accident. It was the product of 10 years of refusal, one man's quiet, methodical, costly refusal to accept the word no. If this story stayed with you, please like and subscribe to Tractor Junkie USA. Your support helps us find and tell the stories of the machines and the people who refuse to stop building them. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from. These stories belong to everyone.